Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about 5 undervalued players that you must have in 2023 fantasy football. But before we can get into things, I would like to ask that if you guys are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, that you please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure they do leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter, please do so at NotoriousFantasy. So without further ado, let's do a nice deep dive Michael Phelps style into 5 undervalued players that you must have in 2023 fantasy football. We begin with my first undervalued player that you must have in 2023 fantasy football, DeAndre Hopkins, wide receiver of the Tennessee Titans, current underdog ADP wide receiver 23 at pick 43.8. Now, I know there are a lot of people that believe that the Tennessee Titans are the wide receiver graveyard where these former great wide receivers like Julio Jones go to be put to rest. But I genuinely believe that DeAndre Hopkins still has the juice for one more great season and potentially multiple other great seasons. I understand that he's getting up there in age, but there is no reason based upon what we've seen recently out of DeAndre Hopkins to believe that he is magically going to fall off of the edge of the earth in terms of his talent as well as where he's going to finish in fantasy football. Now, last year he did only play in 9 games, finishing as the wide receiver 47.5 PPR, but when he was healthy, this guy was a top 12 wide receiver 11 in half PPR points per game. He played in 9 games, like I said, 96 targets, 10.7 per game, number 35 at wide receiver, 64 receptions, 7.1 per game, number 34, 717 receiving yards, 79.7 per game, number 41, and 3 total touchdowns, 50th at wide receiver. In terms of efficiency stats, DeAndre Hopkins is still as efficient as he was back in Houston and as he was in his early time with the Arizona Cardinals. 51.8% route win rate, 4th at wide receiver. 47% win rate versus man coverage, 2nd, and he had a 34.1% dominator rating, 6th at the wide receiver position. DeAndre Hopkins is quarterback immune. He's immunized Aaron Rodgers style. DeAndre Hopkins has had some legitimate dog shit quarterbacks throwing him the football, dating all the way back to his time with the Houston Texans. But at the end of the day, even with the garbage, bottom of the barrel quarterback play, DeAndre Hopkins still ended up finishing as an elite wide receiver year in and year out. Another worry that I've seen from people is that Nick, the Tennessee Titans, Mike Vrabel, they really like to run the ball. And yes, that is true. They do like to run the ball. But I think when you have a running back like Derrick Henry, if he's able to stay healthy all season, that actually helps out DeAndre Hopkins because the defense is so worried that Derrick Henry is going to run the ball and stiff arm some poor bastard into Middle Earth. So I think DeAndre Hopkins is in a good spot in Tennessee. I understand if he signed with the Kansas City Chiefs or the Buffalo Bills or something, people would have a hard-on in their pants for weeks. For hours lasting longer than 6 hours. But ultimately, because he's on the Tennessee Titans, people start to panic. They say, Nick, Ryan Tannehill isn't all that great anymore. And sure, Ryan Tannehill isn't one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. Even as a Dolphins fan, I don't think he ever was one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. But I think we are going to see a much better Tennessee Titans offense than we saw last season. Ryan Tannehill was pretty mid last year. He ended up getting hurt. He was definitely the best quarterback they had, though. Then they went to Malik Willis. That obviously was a disaster. A pie in the face moment for the Titans. And then they went to Josh Dobbs, right? You know Malik Willis was dog shit when they had to roll out Josh Dobbs. So I think if Ryan Tannehill is able to stay healthy, even if they have to pivot to Will Levis, DeAndre Hopkins should be just fine. He is going to be force-fed targets, the clear alpha wide receiver in this offense. Obviously, it sucks for the guy, Treylon Burks, because I was someone who really started to fall in love with the idea that Treylon Burks, while I don't think he's necessarily one of the best receivers in the NFL, he was just going to be peppered with targets. He was going to feast for fantasy. Now that dream is dead, but it's time to start putting some fucking respect on DeAndre Hopkins' name. Again, wide receiver 23 off of the board right now. To me, that is ludicrously high. He should not be wide receiver 24. He should be much lower down, closer to, I would say, wide receiver 18, 16, 15 in that range. So moving now to the number 2 player that is undervalued that you must have in 2023 fantasy football, Deshaun Watson, DeAndre Hopkins, former quarterback, now of the Cleveland Browns, underdog ADP quarterback 9 at pick 83.9. I will note his draft position in every single draft is a little bit different. I see him go as early as the quarterback, I would say 8, and sometimes as late as like the quarterback 13, because there are tons of people that are panicking about Deshaun Watson. I understand that his tape last year was so bad, right? Jacoby Brissett was playing quite well for the Cleveland Browns, and once they inserted Deshaun Watson, the defense got completely set on fire. It was a disaster. Quarterback 36 last year on the season in 6 games, quarterback 25 in points per game, 170 passing attempts, 28.3 per game, number 37, 1,102 passing yards, 183.7 per game, 38th at quarterback, 7 passing touchdowns at a 4.1% rate, 33rd at quarterback, 5 interceptions, 32nd, 36 carries, 19th, 175 rushing yards, 16th, and 1 rushing touchdowns. Now, he didn't even qualify for any of the efficiency stats because he only played in 6 games. And I know people are worried because Deshaun Watson was terrible last year. There are many words to describe the terrible play by Deshaun Watson. Everyone already knows. Now, I was someone who was somewhat pessimistic on how Deshaun Watson would look when he came back, right? It wasn't me thinking he was going to be back to the MVP ways. I figured he would be a little bit rusty, but he even made my expectations. I felt like an idiot because I thought Watson would look a little rusty. Maybe it takes a couple of games. But no, every single one of those games, bottom of the barrel play out of Deshaun Watson. But if you go ahead and remember how great Deshaun Watson was prior to last season, you can understand where the upside lies. In his rookie year, 2017, with a Houston Texans team that was pretty he was the quarterback 1 in points per game. Next year, sophomore year, 2018, quarterback 4 in points per game. 2019, quarterback 2. And 2020 was his worst year as a Houston Texans quarterback, 7th in points per game. So even in his bad year, where I would argue that he didn't look as good, he was still a top 8 quarterback in fantasy football. Obviously, he doesn't play in 2021, and he ends up looking like a complete and utter unmitigated disaster in 2022. Now, even if Deshaun Watson doesn't return to his former glory, where people were potentially touting him to win MVP every single fucking year, basically, outside of 2020, right? 2017 to 2019, this guy was balling out of control. And then he doesn't play, he's rusty, the media is throwing stones at him for good reason, right? I'm not saying that Deshaun Watson's the greatest guy on earth, but in fantasy football, you have to put that aside. You have to put aside the person that Deshaun Watson is and realize that you are drafting whatever the fuck Deshaun Watson does on the field, and I think Deshaun Watson is going to potentially return to that former glory. And even if he doesn't go back to being this top 3 MVP level quarterback in the NFL, he's going to return to be a top 10 quarterback, in my opinion, with legitimate top 5, top 3 upside. Another interesting thing about Deshaun Watson is I feel like people sleep on Watson's rushing upside. Now, he's not Mike Vick, he's not Justin Fields, he's not Lamar Jackson, he's not Jalen Hurts, but in every single season in which he played over 15 games, he has had at least 82 rush attempts. So I think in 2023, we are going to see a similar thing. He has some really solid weapons. Amari Cooper, obviously, in my opinion, a great NFL wide receiver. Maybe not top 10, but certainly a guy you could argue is a top 12 receiver in the NFL. They also have Elijah Moore, a guy that has had some success with the Jets, but obviously last year was a disaster. He wanted to trade out of there. They don't trade him out of the Jets. It is what it is. They have Donovan Peoples-Jones. They have the Chief, David Njoku, and they have my boy, 9-inch Nicholas Chubb. I know I've been touting Nick Chubb all offseason. I do think that this team is going to be looking to throw the ball at a pretty high pace. Maybe not the highest pace at the NFL, but I think they're going to look to throw the ball. I think Deshaun Watson bounces back in a big way, and I think a lot of the risk is mitigated by the fact that he's coming off the board at pick 83.9. Coming off the board is the quarterback 9, because if we were ranking him as quarterback 5, quarterback 6, then I'd start being a little bit nervous, because then he has to return to that former glory. But at quarterback 9, he just got to be better than what he was last year and similar to what he has been in the past. Moving now to my number 3 undervalued player that you must have in 2023 fantasy football. We got the boy Isiah Pacheco, running back of the Kansas City Chiefs, underdog ADP running back 27, pick 87.3. Now, a couple of days ago, I talked up Jerick McKinnon and Clyde Edwards-Helaire because it seemed like Isiah Pacheco was going to be put on the PUP, the physically unable to participate, right? That maybe this guy could potentially miss the first 6 fucking games of the season, and if that happened, his ADP was going to get flushed down the toilet, right? It was going to be bad for Isiah Pacheco, but he's doing everything in training camp. He's running, doing all this stuff. Now, I believe he was still wearing the yellow jersey, which is like what quarterbacks wear. It's like, hey, don't fucking hit this guy. You know, don't want to cause any type of re-injury. But it seems like that surgery that he had is not going to impact him. Based upon everything I've read out of the beat reporters, he is going to be good to go for week number 1. So all of that worry we previously had because Pro Football Talk on Twitter reported that maybe he's going on the PUP, that seems to be out the window at this point. Running back 35.5 PPR last season, tied with Donta Foreman, and running back 46.5 PPR points per game, tied with Foreman and James Robinson. Now, before we break down Isiah Pacheco and players 4 and 5 that I think you guys should be drafting, I would like to give you guys a quick word from our friends and our sponsor over at Underdog Fantasy. If you are new to Underdog Fantasy, they're the best place to play fantasy football, best ball this summer. If you don't know what best ball is, it's the best part about fantasy football. It's the draft, and that's it. There's no waivers, there's no trades, and there is no in-season management. They have the biggest fantasy football tournament ever. $25 to enter, 150 max entries, $15 million in total prizes, $3 million to first place. If you don't want to jump into a big tournament, they post smaller tournaments all the time. Entries of $3, $5, $7 out there, and they also have regular kind of leagues. If you're used to just playing in a 12-team league, you want to play a cash game, you versus 11 other people, you can draft with as low as $3 to enter one of those, and you can win money if you're in first or second place. It's also, in my opinion, the best place to do mock drafts because it's a real draft. People actually care. No one's going to draft a kicker in the first or the second round and completely ruin your mock draft when you're trying to prepare for your league with your friends, your office mates, whoever you play with. So if you want to sign up to Underdog Fantasy, make sure you use promo code Notorious or click on the link in the video description for a first match deposit bonus of up to $100. You deposit $100, an additional $150. You get an additional $50, $25, an additional $25. Make sure you guys check that out. Link in the video description. So back on into things with Isiah Pacheco. Now again, his finish last year, points per game numbers weren't great, but that's because he played in all 17 games and only started 11 of them. I genuinely believe that the Chiefs look at Pacheco as the lead back. I think that any of that upside I talked about with Clyde Edwards-Helaire definitely is dead in the water. There's no fucking reason why they would have taken out Clyde Edwards-Helaire and put in Isiah Pacheco, who's a 7th round pick, Clyde Edwards-Helaire a 1st round pick, if they thought that Clyde Edwards-Helaire had much juice for this offense. So 17 games played with 11 starts in Kansas City last season in his rookie year, 170 carries, 10 per game, number 33, 830 rushing yards, 48.8 per game, number 24, 14 targets, 69th at running back. Very nice, I like. 13 receptions, 64th, 130 receiving yards, 7.6 per game, number 50, and 5 total touchdowns, 31st at running back. In terms of efficiency, he was 10th in true yards per carry and 16th in yards per touch. The biggest downside of Isiah Pacheco is the pass catching is not going to be there for him. Maybe, in the offseason, the Chiefs are working towards giving Pacheco more touches as a whole, so they want to dump the ball off more to him. I think that is possible, but more than likely when you have Jerick McKinnon, that is going to be his role. So that is the biggest downside for Isiah Pacheco, is that he's not going to magically get 60, 70 targets, 50 plus targets, right? He got 14 targets last year. Maybe he can get 25, but again, that's nothing that really swings the pendulum, moves the needle. What I like about Pacheco is where he's going, right? He's the running back 27. So you're not having to pay top 24 running back draft capital. for the guy. He could be the third running back on your fantasy football team. In a pinch, you can play him as the RB number 2. He's on the fucking Chiefs. They're going to score a bunch of points. The biggest problem is they throw a lot in the red zone, but I think with how effective they saw Pacheco was, they're going to try to run a little bit more when they get closer to the goal line. I expect Isiah Pacheco to have a pretty decent season. He has the upside to be, I would say, finish inside the top 18 at running back. I don't necessarily know if he could finish inside the top 12 if he's not catching passes, but there's also a chance that, again, that was just Pacheco in his rookie year. Maybe Andy Reid loves what he sees during training camp, during preseason, and he realizes that he needs to get Pacheco more touches. I see him getting more touches this season. I think he's an incredibly safe pick, which is kind of hard to find at running back. When you're past pick 50, 60, he's pick 87.3, running back 27. And I also like the upside because in any given game, the Chiefs could take a deuce on the defense, and Pacheco could get 2+ touchdowns. So I'm a big fan of Pacheco. Again, incredible safety with some solid upside. At number 4, this is where we start going deeper into the draft. We're balls deep right now with big cock Brock, quarterback of the San Francisco 49ers, Brock Purdy. Underdog ADP, quarterback 24, pick 171.2. I know there's a lot of Trey Lance truthers who think, oh my God, Trey Lance, they traded with the Dolphins. They traded all those first-round picks. Trey Lance has got to start. If you're the 49ers, I get you paid the big bucks for Lance, right? You could have had Waddle. You could have had all these guys that the Dolphins have, but you don't have them. Shout out to the Niners as a Dolphins fan. I love that. But, hey, they're not. I don't think they're going with Lance. I think Brock Purdy's playing. He's free right now. Free. In underdog drafts, he's not necessarily free, but in redraft leagues, he doesn't get drafted. So if you draft, say, Kirk Cousins, you want to draft a number 2 quarterback, you want that backup with upside, go with Brock Purdy. Quarterback 33 last year, 36 in points per game. He had 9 games played with 5 starts. He got in a couple games where he just took a knee early on in the season when Jimmy Guap was healthy, and then obviously they went from Trey Lance to Jimmy Guap to big cock Brock Purdy. 170 pass attempts, 18.9 per game, number 37. 1,374 passing yards, 152.7 per game, number 34. 13 passing touchdowns, 26th. 4 interceptions, 37th. 22 carries, 13 rushing yards, and 1 rushing touchdowns. If you look at his action as an actual starter from when he first started playing through his divisional playoff win with the Cowboys. Now, I don't include the Eagles game because he got hurt in that game. 1,854 passing yards, 231.8 per game, 16 passing touchdowns to 3 interceptions, 66.8% completion percentage, 8.4 yards per attempt with a 111.4 passer rating. Brock Purdy is like that girl that was built like William the Refrigerator Perry in high school, lost all the weight, and now she's a fucking rocket, right? That is what Brock Purdy was, because Brock Purdy was a 7th round draft pick. He was Mr. Irrelevant in the 2022 NFL draft, and now he's the starting quarterback, in my opinion, of one of the best teams in the National Football League, one of the best teams in the NFC. And Brock Purdy is good enough to control the offense, but he also has that swagger, that big dick energy that women talk about, right? He has the pizzazz. He makes these crazy plays. And again, he was fucking Mr. Irrelevant. He was Mr. Irrelevant. No one cared about him. And now he's soaring, he's flying like his name is Troy Bolton. Okay? Brock Purdy has the offense to do it. He has George Kittle. He has Deebo Samuel. He has Brandon Ayuk. He has Christian McCaffrey. He has Jawan Jennings, who's obviously not one of the best players in the NFL, but you get what I mean, right? He has legitimate weapons, and if there's ever a problem, he looks 3 yards to the right or the left, dumps the ball to McCaffrey, and McCaffrey is such an elite running back that he could take the ball 99 yards to the crib. So Brock Purdy, for being Mr. Irrelevant, is in the perfect situation, and he's sneaky really good. Again, if you look at the stats, they're not mouth-watering. You don't look at Brock Purdy, the guy, you're not looking at him, you're like, this is a fucking elite quarterback. But you didn't look at Tom Brady back when that pudgy bastard was drafted by the Patriots and think, oh, this is an elite quarterback. Now, again, I'm not saying Brock Purdy is Tom Brady, right? Because that would be very hard to do. Tom Brady is the greatest quarterback of all time. But what I'm saying is people are sleeping on Brock Purdy just because of his build, the fact that he was Mr. Irrelevant, the fact that, oh my God, Trey Lance is there. Throw all of it out. Brock Purdy is good. He's great. They're great. Tony the Tiger. He could be a top 10 quarterback in fantasy. He doesn't have a lot of rushing prowess, which is going to stop him from potentially finishing inside the top 3 at quarterback. But again, he has all of what you want. He has a solid arm, he's patient, and he has a great fucking offensive line, great weapons. The recipe for success for a fantasy football quarterback. All he doesn't have, again, is the rushing upside. Moving to the final player here. This is, again, another kind of super late round guy, but I've been drafting him a bunch. If you draft 2 tight ends, I think this is the perfect tight end number 2 to be drafting on your team. That is Luke Musgrave, tight end of the Green Bay Packers. Currently coming off the board at pick 206.6 on Underdog Fantasy is the tight end 28. Reading through the early tea leaves, a beat reporter for the Packers stated, yes, I think Musgrave will be the tight end 1 by week 1 for the Packers. The Packers think he can be the true number 1 pass-catching tight end like Big Bob Robert Tonyan was at times, but not consistently. They think maybe Musgrave could be more consistent. This guy was a second-round draft pick, 6'6", 253 pounds. He also says, since he wasn't as consistent, or since Robert Tonyan wasn't as consistent, maybe he's like Jermichael Finley in his prime. The best case scenario for the Packers is Musgrave developing into almost a wide receiver. Think a guy like Darren Waller, not necessarily the best blocker out there, but a great pass catcher, almost like another receiver on your offense. Another different report from OTAs was that Luke Musgrave is showing to be quote-unquote different, looking really, really good, like a standout player in OTAs. Musgrave missed time last year, and then he had knee surgery, but he was able to run the 40-yard dash and do other agility drills at the combine, so the knee injury well past him at this point. He ran a 4.61 40-yard dash, 88th percentile. He ranks 15th all-time in tight end athleticism score according to Player Profiler. He only played in 2 games last year, 22 years old at Oregon State, 11 receptions on 15 targets, 169 receiving yards, 15.4 yards per reception, I apologize, 1 receiving touchdown, 12 games played in 2021 at 21 years old at Oregon State, also played his whole career at Oregon State, 22 receptions on 40 targets, 304 receiving yards, 12.5% target share, and 1 receiving touchdown. Again, this is a big motherfucker. 6'6", 253 pounds. I know people doubt Jordan Love. They don't think the Packers offense is going to be that great. I think kind of the opposite. I don't think they're going to be the Chiefs or something like that. The Bills, the Dolphins, the Bengals, one of the better offenses in the NFL. Of course they're not going to be that. The Eagles, but they're going to be all right. And Luke Musgrave is free. He's free. So even if he ends up not being the best, you drafted him for free. You probably just not even draft him, fucking pick him up off the waiver wire if you already did your fantasy draft, right? It's July 21st as you're watching this, July 20th as I'm recording this, so hopefully you didn't draft yet, but, you know, he's going to not really move up boards because even if he moves up, right, maybe he moves to tight end 22. Still basically undrafted in a lot of leagues. So he's a great tight end number 2, in my opinion. If you go with one of the later guys like Everett, you want to take another shot, go with Luke Musgrave. Again, the Packers beat writers appear to love him. I think he has the upside to beat Sam Laporta and be the rookie tight end number 1 in fantasy football this year. And again, I think the Packers offense is going to be sneaky, much better than people think. So thank you guys all so much for watching. If you did end up enjoying, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below as well as hitting that like button. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter, please do so at NotoriousFantasy. Again, make sure you guys check out Underdog Fantasy, link in the video description, or promo code Notorious for a first match deposit bonus of up to $100. I love you guys all so much. I hope you have a great rest of your guys' day, and as always, good boy.